Nope. All right. I'm going to leave you with this. And I'm early too. Wow. And if you have questions, please, anything on money, markets, anything. Yes?
So I have a question. What's the difference between mutual funds and exchange trade funds?
A mutual fund is valued once a day, right? And there's two ways in a mutual fund. There's active management, and that's a good question, thank you. Active management and passive management. Active management was that money manager such as Marion. She's actively buying and selling the fried chicken in that example, right? That's active management. They're actively buying and selling stocks and bonds. If it's a stock fund, stocks, bonds, if it's a bonds fund. Passive management is I'm based on that index. Remember the index? The S&P 500 or, here we go. The S&P 500, the Russell 2000, 3000. That's called passive management. But either way, a mutual fund's valued once a day at the close of business.
Okay.
Right? An exchange traded fund is much the same thing, except it's not actively managed. It's passively managed based on one of these index, and it's valued by the second because it's traded on an exchange, typically the New York Stock Exchange. So it's kind of like a mutual fund that's traded second by second. That's the difference between the two. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Yes?
Is there a rule of thumb? So when you're first starting off and branding your career, how much investment? Is there a rule of thumb to how much you make and how much you invest? It's not just up to the.
That is a very good question. Thank you for bringing that up. So otherwise I would have spaced on that. What do you think the national average is for Americans saving for retirement? Their 401ks, 403bs, whatever it is, as a percentage of their income. What do you think the national average is for all Americans in this country?
10%.
It's under 10%.
I'm sorry?
10%.
I think it's under 10.
10%?
5%.
How much? 5%? 2%? 2? Anybody else? I feel like Bob Barker up here. Anybody else? 6%. Who said 5? You're the closest without going over. 6% of my gross income. Why? Because in private sector 401ks, if the employer is so benevolent, they'll offer that 401k. They don't have to. And if they're even more benevolent, they'll match. In other words, I put in $1, they'll put in 50 cents. I put in $1, they'll put in $1. Typically up to the first 6% of my compensation. That's why the national average is 6%. Right? Because I don't want to, if I don't do that, at least to get the match, I'm leaving free money on the table. Does that make sense? Right? Most certified financial planners, Susie Orman, will tell you to take 10% of your pre-tax income and put it away for retirement. Right? Dave Ramsey will tell you 15%. The Wes Hanley rule of thumb, until it hurts. But I don't care if it's 25 bucks a month, which is the minimum in most retirement plans, including the Oregon Savings Growth Plan. I don't care if it's 50 bucks a month, whatever it is. You get the thing open and you start saving, because two things are going to happen. One, you're not going to stop. And two, one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be 30 years old and you'll have 6, 7 grand saved away. One day you wake up and you're 40 years old and you'll have 40,000, 50,000 saved away. One day you wake up, you're 50 years old and you have 6 figures socked away. That's when you're glad you did it. Does that make sense? Two things are going to happen. When you start, and this goes away from investing now into retirement plans. When you start putting money into a retirement plan at work, when you get the job and you start putting money in that 401k, 403b, whatever it is, in the beginning, these are all your contributions. This is all your money. You get the statements, you go online, you're on your phone, whatever it is, and you got like 1,200 bucks in this thing. You're like, dude, this is all my money. Why am I doing this for? Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Because here's what happened. If you took a mountain bar chart of how these things work, here's my 20s, here's my 30s, here's my 40s, and boom, here's my 50s. Two things happen in your 50s. One, you're in your peak earning years. You're going to make more money in your chosen profession in your late 40s into your 50s than any other point in your lifetime. For most American workers, age 50 and above are your peak earning years. Two, if you've been putting money into this retirement plan the whole time, now it starts to feed off of itself. Right? Plus, I'm making more money, I'm putting more money into it. So it just goes like that. Does that make sense? Right? I don't care if it's 25 or 50 bucks a month. Whatever it is, when you start working, you open a retirement plan, you start putting money in. In 28 years of doing this, I have talked to people who, in their 20s, and they used to say to me, dude, retirement's for old people, go away. And what happened after 2008 is they saw what happened to their parents, and they saw what happens to their friends' parents, and they didn't want to be like that. So they started saving. I've talked to people in their 30s. Wes, retirement sounds logical, but we have a child and one on the way. Talk to us later, please. And then I've talked to people in their 40s. Retirement, that sounds pretty good right now. But we have a daughter who wants to go to Willamette University for some reason, and we have to sell everything we own to pay for the first semester. Talk to me later. And then I talk to people in their 50s, and they'll have $2,000, $3,000 saved up. And they start yelling at me, like it's my fault. And it doesn't start that way. It kind of builds into this crescendo thing, which is more or less, why the hell didn't I do that? And then boom, here we go. I could have had $200,000, $300,000. You know how much money? And those are the people that go back to the workplace and say, don't do what I did. Don't be me. Save money, start now. Does that make sense? Questions?
So what about, so what about the savings for, paying for college or weddings or things like that come earlier than retirement? Do you,
Right.
for someone starting out as a professional after they graduate, for savings for those early years?
You're going to have a lot of there are life events that are going to happen, and I'll explain this in a second, but I'm never going to stop saving for retirement. I'm not, right? I don't know if I should tell you this story or not. I'm 24 years old. I'm living in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, of all places. I'm working at a department store, and I was sort of dating this girl who was a little older than me, and they found out, and they transferred her to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So she calls me up and says, come on out. It's a 10-hour drive from Oklahoma City to Albuquerque, New Mexico, right? So, okay, I drove. I get there. And then she says, what are you doing here? I said, you told me to come. She said, no, I didn't. Slams the door in my face. Nice. I'm faced with a 10-hour drive home, right? So I go to the gas station. I go to get some gas, right? I pump the gas because, this is New Mexico. You pump your own gas. And I whip out the credit card, and the guy comes back and says, dude, your card's been declined, and I have to confiscate it. Why? Because I maxed out and I stopped paying. 25 years old, right? Long-winded story, but what's the point? Life happens, right? We all make mistakes. I've been a licensed financial advisor for 28 years, and I've made a ton of mistakes in my lifetime. But you don't stop saving for your retirement. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to leave you with the 3, what I call non-negotiables of retirement planning, right? And some of this is not going to be applicable to you today, but it will be in the future. So you might want to write this down or at least remember it. Number 1, and this is what the Susie Ormans and the Dave Ramseys of the world will tell you to do. Number 1, have an emergency savings account. 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Not what you make, but what it costs you to live. Rent, mortgage, car payment, truck payment, insurance, Netflix, Hulu, data plans, Dutch Brothers. No, I'm kidding. 3 to 6 months living expenses, you put it in a savings account at a bank or a credit union. You do not get a debit card or a phone app for it. You make it to where you physically have to walk in the building to go get it. My roof caved in, my car broke down, my kid needs braces, right? Life happens, right? That's an emergency. I say this to the guys in this room. When you get $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in this thing, which eventually, earlier in your careers when you start working, you should have, you resist the temptation to buy a toy with this or put a down payment on a toy with this. That's not what it's for. I've got cancer. I'm out of paid time off. The bills are still coming. That's an emergency. Does that make sense? So number 1, emergency savings account. Number 2, put as much money as you possibly can into a retirement plan, preferably at work. Why work? Because typically the fees are lower, the investments are a little bit better, and it comes out of my paycheck, no muss, no fuss. Does that make sense? Right? And I've been babbling up here for 45 minutes on this, so if I haven't convinced you by now, forget about it. Number 3, and this gets a little esoteric for some of you, but remember this. Get a will or some sort of estate planning document. Right? Now, I'm not a lawyer, but most certified financial planners, the Susie Ormans and the Dave Ramseys of the world will tell you to have a will. Now, know this, anything that has a beneficiary attached to it, like your retirement plan or something like that, you don't need a will for that, right? It will go directly to that beneficiary. Life insurance, retirement plans, 401ks, individual retirement accounts. My bank or credit union account today, I can set up to have a beneficiary on, right? But it's personal property, real estate, minor children. Minor children do not come with beneficiary tags on the back. Does that make sense? Let's say you get married. You now have 1, 2 children, right? State night, Friday night, you're on the town, car accident, you're both dead. Who's gonna raise the kids? If you didn't write it down, a judge may end up deciding, right? Especially if families from both sides, on either side, are now starting to fight over this. You didn't leave any written instructions, the judge has got to read your mind. Meanwhile, you're dead. For a long time, too, by the way. Don't let a judge decide. Get a will. You don't have to run out and do it today, right? But when you start your career, especially when you get married, get a will. Cost you $50 to do it yourself, $200 through a lawyer. It's not going to kill you, right? Every 5 years, you look at it, you make sure it's still what you want. So, emergency savings account, 3 to 6 months living expenses. Put money in a retirement plan until it hurts, and make sure you have a will or some sort of estate planning device. Those are the 3 basics of financial planning. You do that, you got a pretty good financial foundation. You can go from there. What is a stock?
Ownership.
What is a bond?
Loan.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
I saw in there you mentioned inflation-adjusted bonds.
Tips.
Oh, that's what.
Treasury inflation protected securities. It'd take me 20 minutes to explain. I'll tell you after.
Yeah, they sound a lot better than even
They've
government.
been around for 20 years and nobody likes them because we haven't had any inflation. But if we have inflation in the future, yeah, then they start looking appealing. I'll explain. Any other questions, comments, concerns? In the words of the rock star, you've been a beautiful audience. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, Wes.
How do you do that?
We're gonna drop to the
They're
scholarship
just
now.
search for
Does
them.
anybody,